The 1992 Formula 1 World Champion, Nigel Mansell, had a career filled with injuries. None of that stopped him from being awesome and killing it on the racetrack. In 1987, he also got himself injured in the most absurd way possible. You'd think he'd have a good excuse to not have any interviews after getting injured. But you'd be wrong. Follow me into 1987 and find out what happened to Big Nige. This video is for the old F1 playlist. In case you like these old stories, I'll leave it up as an end screen at the end of the video. I'm Wimbo. Here's 3 seconds to leave a like. Big Nige. Let's start with a little information on this big mustache fella called Nigel Mansell. He was born on the 8th of August 1953 near Birmingham and was driving cars from the age of 7 in fields around his house. Later he went on to drive karts, and after that he raced in Formula 4. He won that title in 1977, and there is a story about a massive injury from that time as well. But we'll get to that later. Mansell was meant to be an aerospace engineer, but he quit that job and sold many of his belongings to pay for his racing career. He didn't have a rich family to pay for it all. He had to sell the house he had bought with his wife Rosanna to pay his way into Formula 3. That's how dedicated he was. In 1979, he had another major shunt, which I'll talk about later as well. During that period, he had the opportunity to test for Lotus, which was led by the legendary F1 engineer Colin Chapman. He made his debut in Formula 1 in 1980 at the Austrian Grand Prix, where he had another awkward injury. I'm sorry, but we'll talk about it later. After Colin Chapman had passed away, Mansell moved to Williams. He was very close with Chapman, and his death had hit him hard. In the next 2 seasons, Nigel Mansell, who hadn't won a race before, started winning. He won 11 races in a year and a half, which is quite a big achievement, seeing how bad the reliability was those days. He didn't win the championships, unfortunately. He did get an injury again after a shunt in qualifying in 1987. But you guessed it, we'll talk about it later. At Williams they grew tired of him always complaining, and Frank Williams called him a pain in the arse. So he left as soon as it was possible and joined Ferrari in 1989. That season went great, and the tifosi called him Il Leone, which means the lion. That was all undone when the evil Frenchman Alain Prost joined, and that smooth talking Frenchman was a lot smarter politically. So Mansell went back to Williams, where he won the championship in 1992. I'll leave it at that to not make the video too long. He did have more races in F1 after that, but maybe I'll cover that in another video. I desperately want to get into the crashes and injuries now. Crashes and injuries. No driver fought harder to get into Formula 1 racing, and few fought harder when they got there. Hugely determined, immensely aggressive, and spectacularly daring. He was one of the most exciting drivers ever with his win or bust approach. 31 wins, 32 crashes. This is what has been written about Nigel Mansell, and I have to say that this sounds pretty exciting. If only the British media was this kind to my driver. I wasn't watching F1 in those days yet, and sometimes I wish I was. On the other hand, I'm having fun discovering all these stories now and making videos about them. If you enjoy it too, do me and yourself a favor and subscribe. So Nigel Mansell has all these wins and crashes. Let's look at the crashes and injuries before we explore the one I teased in the title. The first major injury was in Formula 4. In 1977, he had an accident during testing and broke his neck. You heard that right, his neck. That injury nearly put him in a wheelchair for life, and he was told to never drive again, and he had to stay put for 6 months to heal. So what did that stubborn bastard do? He pretended to go to the toilet and escaped from the hospital and kept racing. I mentioned an accident in Formula 3 earlier. Mansell had a collision with another car in 1979 and suffered a broken vertebra in his back. He took a bunch of painkillers to do the test for the Lotus seat, and he got it. I think Mansell was more lucky than smart sometimes. In the Netherlands we have a saying, he who burns his butt cheeks must sit on the blisters. Meaning that you have to deal with the consequences of your own silliness. Well, Mansell had to sit on blisters after his 1980 debut race with Lotus when a fuel leak caused a fire which burned his buttocks. Oof, nasty. In 1987 the World Championship for drivers was won by Nelson Piquet for the third and final time. He won just 3 races compared to his teammate Mansell with 6 wins, but Mansell had to give up the challenge when he crashed in qualifying for the Japanese Grand Prix and injured his back. The two of them were bitter rivals and Nigel Mansell just tried a little too hard to beat him and crashed. He missed the Australian Grand Prix due to that injury, which pretty much handed the title to the Brazilian loudmouth. Piquet said a few things about Mansell's wife. He was a bit of an asshole back then, and from the stories that came out a while ago, he hasn't changed. Anyway, this video is about Mansell, not Piquet. I'm probably forgetting more crashes and injuries, but I'm sure you can let me know in the comments. We have arrived at the injury I was alluding to earlier, the one that happened in 1987 in Austria. Austria, 1987. It's the 16th of August on the Oostenrijkring in Spielberg, Austria. The grid is packed with legendary names like Prost, Senna, Mansell, Piquet, Berger, Arnoux, Patrese and many more. It was the 100th race for the huge Englishman and one that went extremely well for him. Or did it? The race had to be restarted twice. At the first start, Martin Brundle in his Zag Speed crashed, as well as the 2 Tyrrell cars and a Nige car. At the second start, Mansell had a clutch problem and dropped down the order, but there was a pileup and the race had to be restarted again 2 hours later. The third start went okay, even with some drivers driving the team's spare car. There were no further problems. Nigel's problem was after the race. A race he won, by the way. He won by leaping his teammate Nelson Piquet, who was trying to pass back markers. So after the race, Mansell was celebrating his win in the courtesy car and wanted to give his helmet to a fan. He stood up to hand it over, but had failed to see a beam under an upcoming bridge. He hit that girder full on with his head as the driver of the courtesy car didn't know he had stood up. I don't know if he was unconscious after the blow, but it looks mighty painful in the footage. In the interview with the legendary commentator Murray Walker, they went over the events and Mansell carefully took off his cap to show the massive egg that had grown on his head. He took the cap off really slowly to not touch it too much. And what did Mr. Walker do? Yes, he accidentally poked his finger in it. I laughed so hard when I saw that. I had to make a video about it. All's well that ends well. Big Nige didn't suffer much more than a sore head for a few days after that incident. I'm sure all the other injuries bothered him much more and they weren't funny at all. Mansell is a legend of the sport and I probably don't know half of the stories about him. I know he pulled a lot of pranks on teammates, if Adrian Newey's stories from his book are to be believed. F1 was a dangerous sport in those days, and the drivers of that era were modern day gladiators who risked their lives for our entertainment. I am certainly entertained even decades later. I hope you were entertained by this video. Take care now, doei doei.